Audible Archives presents Ashford Beneath the Shadow, written by Raul. I'm your host and narrator, Rob. The night is darkest just before the dawn. The rain fell in a relentless drizzle, turning the cobbled streets of Ashford Core into mirrors of flickering gaslight. Drake Vane's coat was drawn tight around his lean frame, the collar damp, but his eyes were sharp beneath the shadow of his hat. The city exhaled around him, the hiss of tram lines, the distant clang of factory bells, and the faint, persistent scent of coal smoke. He had been summoned to the outskirts, to a crumbling building known locally as the Sanctuary. A place abandoned to rumor, whispers of crime, and shadowy refuge. The telegram had been brief: disturbance at Sanctuary. Possible threat. Need your expertise. Inspector Harrow. Drake's boots clicked against the slick stones as he approached the building. Its facade, once grand, had fallen into neglect. Windows boarded, iron gates rusted, and a sense of foreboding hung over it like a low fog. Inside, the air was damp and heavy. Shadows clung to the corners, and the faint smell of mildew and old smoke stung the senses. Drake drew his revolver, hands steady, eyes scanning the darkness. He had learned in Ashford and in the army that the quietest rooms often hid the sharpest dangers. A voice, faint and trembling, broke the silence. "Detective." Drake's steel-gray eyes found a young woman, drenched, clutching a shawl to her chest. "You must be Miss Larkins?" he asked. She nodded, her face pale. I heard noises. Screams. Something unnatural." He gestured for her to follow him. "Stay close. Describe everything you remember, exactly as it happened." She swallowed hard. "It started last night, shadows moving along the walls. Figures whispering my name. And then, the smell of blood, though no one was hurt when I looked. But I couldn't sleep, and when I tried to leave, the door, it wouldn't open." Drake's eyes narrowed. Trapped, but unharmed. Intruders or something else? He moved further into the sanctuary, noting faint scuff marks, disturbed dust, and the subtle, deliberate signs of someone, or something, used to moving in silence. Every corner, every shadow, every echo in the hallway spoke to him. Patterns emerged not in the chaos but in the minutiae: the slight drag of a foot, the precise placement of furniture to block paths, the remnants of old locks tampered with. "Detective, I don't understand," Miss Larkins whispered. "Why would anyone do this?" Drake's gaze swept the room, lingering on a jagged piece of wood propped against a wall, an old ledger lying open on the floor. Fear, control, obsession, and sometimes vengeance. The sanctuary is not just a building, it's a stage. And someone has been rehearsing their act here, meticulously, for weeks. Or months. He crouched, examining the ledger. Faint notations, precise measurements, and lists of names, visitors, residents, and dates. Someone had been cataloging, observing, calculating. Someone with patience and a dark purpose. Drake stood slowly, turning to Miss Larkins. "You are safe for now, but this place, Sanctuary, is a trap as much as it is a refuge. And we need to discover who said it, why, and what they plan next." Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming against the crumbling roof. Inside, shadows deepened, and the first threads of a pattern began to reveal themselves to Drake Vane, the quiet observer drawn once again into the city's dangerous undercurrents. Drake Vane sat cross-legged on the damp floor of the sanctuary, the ledger open before him. The pages, yellowed and water-streaked, contained neat, precise handwriting that catalogued names, dates, and cryptic annotations. Each line, he realized, was more than a record. It was a breadcrumb left by someone methodical, someone intent on control. Miss Larkins hovered near the doorway, wringing her shawl nervously. "Detective, do you think it's dangerous?" Drake didn't look up. His steel-gray eyes scanned the ledger with meticulous focus. "Dangerous, yes, but predictable. People who leave traces rarely intend them to be discovered, yet their habits betray them. Look here." He tapped a page with a gloved finger. "See these dates? Each corresponds to a visitor or resident, yet the annotations, symbols, small marks, indicate observation and perhaps interference. Someone has been tracking movements, perhaps testing reactions, for weeks. Miss Larkins leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. Testing reactions? What do you mean? Drake's gaze remained fixed on the ledger. Patterns reveal intent. A shadow moving through a hall, doors left unlocked or jammed, subtle misplacements of objects. These are all experiments in control. The person behind this wants to see how people respond, what they reveal when confronted with subtle manipulation. He noted small scratches along the ledger's edge, faint smudges of dirt, the remnants of a precise hand that had handled it carefully. This is not random. This is a mind obsessed with order, calculation, and observation. Whoever is behind the sanctuary has patience and a plan. Miss Larkins swallowed hard. And the noises? The shadows? Drake finally looked up, eyes meeting hers. They are deliberate. To instill fear, to test limits, to see if control can be maintained. The person behind this believes that even in a house full of people, solitude is possible if you understand human behavior. And they understand it well. He stood, closing the ledger gently. We need to identify the signature of this observer. Every movement, every mark, every line in this ledger tells us something about them. Once we can connect the patterns to a person, we can anticipate their next move. Drake moved to a corner where the floorboards creaked differently from the rest of the hall. A faint line of disturbed dust traced the path of a passage, barely noticeable. He crouched, running a gloved hand along it. There's more here than the ledger suggests. Someone familiar with the building has been moving through it, silently, leaving traces only someone trained to observe would notice. Miss Larkins shivered. How long has this been happening? Drake straightened, eyes cold and calculating. Long enough to learn the building, long enough to catalog its residents, long enough to manipulate them without immediate detection. We are dealing with patience, precision, and obsession. He pocketed the ledger, revolver at his side. Stay close. Observe everything. And trust nothing that seems ordinary. The sanctuary is not merely a refuge, it is a stage for a careful, dangerous mind. And we are in its center. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, but inside, the shadows seemed to thicken, curling around the corners of the crumbling building. Drake Vane moved forward, tracing the faintest disturbances, listening for patterns in the silence, and preparing to follow the obsessive mind that had turned the supposed sanctuary into a trap. Drake Vane moved carefully through the dim corridors of the sanctuary, every step deliberate, every sense alert. The ledger's patterns had revealed a narrow window of opportunity. The person behind the disturbances always moved at predictable intervals, yet their identity remained concealed. Miss Larkins followed, clutching her shawl. Detective, do you think they're still here? Drake's steel-gray eyes flicked to a faint shadow shifting behind a half-closed door. Possibly. Or they may be watching us already, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Patience is their tool, fear their instrument. But obsession leaves traces, and we will find them. He approached the door silently, noting a small scuff mark near the threshold and the faint impression of a handprint on the dusty wall. See this? He whispered. Not just movement. Someone has been here recently, testing access points, gauging reactions. Whoever it is knows this building intimately. Drake pushed the door open slowly. The room was small, once an office, now littered with abandoned papers and furniture shifted from its original position. A figure crouched in the corner, head down, hands clutching a bundle of cloth. Step out slowly, Drake commanded, revolver raised but steady. Hands visible. No sudden movements. The figure obeyed, trembling. A young man, pale, with nervous eyes that darted like a trapped animal. I didn't mean any harm, he stammered. Drake's gaze measured him carefully. Explain your presence. Your movements have been traced throughout this building. Who are you, and what have you been doing here? The man swallowed hard. My name is Elias Rook, but I've been hiding. Someone has been threatening me. I came to the sanctuary for safety, but I think they know I'm here. Drake's eyes narrowed. Threatened by whom? And why leave traces that anyone could follow? Elias hesitated, then spoke in a low, urgent tone. I was told to watch, to keep track of the residents. They said it was for protection, but it didn't feel right. I seen things, signs, plans. I couldn't stop it, but I didn't want to hurt anyone either. Drake's mind raced, connecting the dots. So you're involved unwillingly. Someone has been using you to manipulate events inside the sanctuary. And the ledger, the markings, the disturbances, they're their work, not yours. Elias nodded, relief mingling with fear. Yes, I just wanted to hide, detective. I didn't know who else to trust. Drake lowered his revolver slightly. But you are telling the truth. But we must move carefully. The person orchestrating this is patient, precise, and watching. Any misstep and they will act. He gestured toward the corridor. Come with me. We'll secure the building, trace their patterns, and uncover who's behind all of this. No detail is too small, no movement insignificant, and you must follow instructions without hesitation. Outside, the fog crept through the streets of Ashford, curling around the sanctuary like a living shroud. Inside, the first threads of the manipulator's network had been exposed, and Drake Vane, patient, precise, and unrelenting, was ready to follow them to the source. Drake Vane crouched over the sanctuary's floor plan, chalk tracing the corridors, hidden staircases, and unused service passages. Every nook and cranny had been noted in Elias Rook's account, and each disturbance, each subtle trace, was slowly being connected to the manipulator's movements. Detective, Elias whispered, his voice tense, there are rooms they frequent more than others. Places where they leave messages, warnings. Symbols carved in wood, notes tucked behind beams. I tried to avoid them, but I saw everything. Drake's steel-gray eyes scanned the map, calculating, connecting dots. Symbols, notes, these are markers. They indicate presence, control, and observation. Someone is not just hiding, they are asserting authority over this building, creating a network of influence. He moved through the sanctuary silently, observing each mark in the dim light. A scratched circle on a doorframe, a faint chalk arrow along a floorboard, a tiny piece of paper tucked beneath a loose brick. Each element was deliberate, designed to communicate, to warn, or to taunt. Their control is extensive, Drake murmured. They want to be noticed by those who watch carefully and ignored by everyone else. This is classic obsessive behavior, the desire for recognition coupled with a fear of confrontation. Elias shivered. They've watched me for days. I didn't know how much until now. Drake nodded. That's why patterns matter. Attention to detail exposes the otherwise invisible. This person believes they can manipulate events without detection, but every trace, no matter how small, tells a story. They moved toward the west wing, where recent disturbances had been reported. Drake crouched near a windowsill, noting a series of small indentations, barely visible, as if someone had been testing the strength of the glass. They're preparing for something, he said. Possibly an intrusion, or a way to escape unnoticed. The pattern suggests patience, watching, waiting, and testing limits. Elias swallowed nervously. What should we do? Drake's voice was calm, measured. We anticipate their next move. We mark every trace, document every symbol, and predict where they will strike next. Obsession leaves a map, and I intend to follow it to its source. He rose, eyes sweeping the fogged windows and the darkened halls. The sanctuary is no longer just a refuge, it's a trap set by a meticulous mind. And tonight, we begin unraveling it. Outside, the first drops of evening rain began to patter against the roof. Inside, Drake Vane traced the manipulator's network, connecting the threads of obsession with precision, preparing to confront a danger that had been hiding in plain sight all along. The sanctuary was quiet now, but Drake Vane knew better than to trust silence. Shadows moved with the rhythm of the old building, and the faintest sound could indicate presence or an intentional trap. He moved through the main hall, revolver in hand, notebook ready, eyes sweeping every corner. Elias Rook followed closely, his movements hesitant but deliberate. Detective, I saw something earlier, he whispered. A figure, someone moving through the library. They didn't notice me. Drake's gaze sharpened. The library, the heart of the sanctuary. That's where they've left the most clues, and possibly the most dangerous patterns. Show me. They entered the library carefully. Dust motes danced in the thin light filtering through boarded windows. Books were scattered across the floor, some pulled from shelves, others stacked neatly, almost as if to signal a message. Drake crouched, examining the subtle arrangement. These are deliberate placements, he murmured. The books are markers, reference points for someone who moves with precision. They indicate where the manipulator has been and possibly where they intend to go next. Elias pointed to a faint indentation on the carpet. They stepped here, but very lightly, like they were testing the floor. Drake knelt, tracing the marks with a gloved finger. Exactly. Movement controlled, deliberate, aware of observation. This is not random. This is a person mapping their environment and our response. A sudden noise, a floorboard creaking, made both men freeze. Drake spun toward the source, revolver raised, eyes scanning the shadows. A figure darted behind a bookcase, disappearing from sight. They're close, Drake whispered, voice calm but tense. And they want to be noticed just enough to unsettle us. Elias's hands trembled. Do you think they'll attack? Drake's eyes flicked to the ledger he had examined earlier. Not yet. They are still testing. Observing. Every movement we make is part of their experiment. But one misstep, one predictable action, and they will act. He rose, voice low and steady. We need to control the environment, predict their paths, and anticipate interference. Every trace they leave is a piece of the puzzle. Missed, it can be dangerous. Observed, it becomes a key to stopping them. For the next hour, Drake and Elias carefully moved through the sanctuary, tracing marks, noting symbols, and following subtle signs of manipulation. A drawer slightly ajar, a chair moved an inch, the faint scuff of shoes across the floor, each element was part of the manipulator's careful choreography. As night deepened, Drake paused near the staircase leading to the upper floors. They are preparing for a more direct intervention, he said, voice barely above a whisper. The interference we've seen is only a test. Soon they will reveal themselves fully. And when they do, we must be ready. Elias swallowed hard, nodding. I don't think I can stay calm when that happens. Drake's gaze was steel, unyielding. Calm is a choice. Observation is a tool. And the manipulator will reveal their next step only if we are patient and precise. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and the rain returned in a steady rhythm. Inside, the sanctuary held its breath, waiting for the obsessive mind to act, unaware that Drake Vane was already following the traces to its source. The upper floors of the sanctuary were colder, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and something faintly metallic. Drake Vane moved with deliberate caution, revolver in hand, eyes sweeping every shadow. Elias followed closely, clutching the ledger, his face pale with apprehension. A faint click echoed down the corridor. Drake froze, ears straining. The sound was deliberate, measured, someone testing a lock, a trapdoor, or perhaps just gauging reaction. They're here, Drake whispered, and they're testing us. Every step we take is observed, every reaction noted. Stay close, move deliberately, and do not speak unless necessary. They approached a doorway leading to a guest room. Drake noticed the subtle disturbance in the dust near the threshold, a scuff, a slight indentation of a shoe. They passed here recently, he murmured, crouching. They want us to see that they've been present. Intimidation through observation. Classic obsessive behavior. Before Elias could respond, a shadow detached itself from the darkness inside the room. A figure moved swiftly, armed with a small, concealed weapon. Drake fired first, the revolver bark echoing through the halls, forcing the intruder to retreat. Elias stumbled backward. Detective. They tried to... Drake gestured sharply for silence, scanning the doorway. Not an attack yet. They're testing courage, reactions, precision. Every movement is designed to measure us. The figure reappeared, moving silently toward the staircase. Drake's eyes narrowed. Upper levels. They're trying to hurt us, guide our responses. Follow me. They ascended cautiously. The hallway above was lined with old paintings, their glass catching the dim light. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Drake's revolver remained trained on the corridor ahead, muscles coiled for any sudden movement. Another sound, a faint scraping of metal against wood, alerted him. He ducked instinctively and fired, forcing the manipulator to vanish into a narrow service passage. "They are prepared," Drake muttered. "They know this building intimately. Every corridor, every hidden door, every vantage point is mapped. And they've counted on us reacting to their cues." Elias shook, voice trembling. "Detective, how do we stop them if they know every move?" Drake's gaze swept the hallway, steel-cold, analytical. "We anticipate. We predict. Obsession leaves a pattern. Patience and attention to detail will reveal it. They want us to act impulsively. We will not." They followed the faintest traces, footprints, scuff marks, dust displacement, toward the heart of the upper floors. Drake knew the manipulator had grown overconfident, believing their careful orchestration was flawless. "This is their first direct intervention," he whispered. "They are testing our limits. And like all obsessive minds, they will leave the smallest error. We will find it, exploit it, and end this before it escalates further." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a warning. Inside, the shadows thickened, twisting and coiling around the corridors. Drake Vane pressed forward, patient, precise, and ready for the inevitable confrontation with a mind as calculated as his own. The sanctuary's upper corridors were a maze of shadows and creaking boards, yet Drake Vane moved with unwavering precision, every step calculated, every glance scanning for the faintest disturbance. Elias followed closely, clutching the ledger that had become both key and map to the manipulator's movements. Drake stopped at a junction, noting the subtle abrasions on the wooden floor and the faint chalk marks on the wall. "They've circled this area several times," he murmured. "Watching, testing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike or to retreat. Obsession always leaves a predictable rhythm if you know how to read it." Elias swallowed nervously. "Detective, do you think they'll hurt us?" Drake's steel-gray eyes met his. "Perhaps, but more likely, they want to manipulate. Fear, confusion, obedience, these are their weapons. Physical harm is secondary unless they feel cornered." Ahead, the faint glint of light caught Drake's attention, a brass knob slightly ajar on a hidden door. He signaled Elias to stay back and approached quietly, hand resting on the revolver. The room beyond was dark, lined with shelves, papers, and an assortment of personal effects that had been moved with meticulous care. A soft rustle came from the far corner. Drake froze, eyes narrowing. "They're here," he whispered, "and they're watching us." From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a woman poised, calm, her gaze sharp beneath a veil of hair. Her movements were deliberate, precise, each step echoing authority. "Detective Vane," she said, voice low and measured. "I wondered how long it would take you to notice me." Drake's revolver remained steady. "Or you? Why turn the sanctuary into a trap?" She tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. Control, observation, protection, all intertwined. The sanctuary was meant to be safe. But some minds cannot resist testing boundaries, even in places of refuge. "I merely facilitated the lessons they needed to learn." Elias stepped forward, voice trembling. "You've been behind all this? The shadows, the disturbances." The woman's eyes softened briefly at Elias, but her tone remained firm. "Not all at once. But I guided, observed, and intervened when necessary. Every mark, every symbol, every hidden path. They were all part of understanding who could be trusted and who could not." Drake's gaze was relentless. "And the fear, the manipulation? That was your method?" She nodded. "This precision teaches more than leniency. Fear ensures attention. Observation uncovers truth. You of all people should understand the necessity of methodical action, Detective. Drake studied her carefully, noting the calm, calculated presence, the obsession mirrored in her poise. Then we are dealing with an obsessive mind, he said slowly. One who believes that control justifies the means, and one who underestimated patience, observation, and consequences. She allowed a faint sigh. Perhaps, but even the careful must adapt when confronted with someone equally vigilant. The air in the room seemed to shift. For the first time, the manipulator's control was challenged, and Drake Vane, patient, precise, and unyielding, felt the balance of power tilt ever so slightly toward the observer. The dim light in the sanctuary flickered as rain streaked the windows, casting long, wavering shadows across the corridors. Drake Vane stood rigid, revolver at the ready, while the manipulator, a woman of careful, deliberate movements, watched him with an unsettling calm. "You've followed the breadcrumbs," she said softly, almost admiringly, "and yet the path ahead is treacherous. Are you prepared for what lies at the end?" Drake's gaze remained fixed. "I don't follow breadcrumbs for curiosity. I follow them for truth. And if the path is treacherous, all the better. It reveals the mind behind it." She tilted her head, the faintest smile ghosting her lips. "Very well. But the lessons must continue. You think this is observation, patience, but it's also survival. The sanctuary tests those who enter. And now you've entered its heart." Before Drake could respond, a hidden mechanism clicked, and a section of the floorboard shifted. Dust rose in a thin column as a concealed trapdoor opened, revealing a narrow passage leading downward into darkness. "They've set another test," Elias whispered, clutching his shawl tightly. "Down there, it's dangerous." Drake crouched, inspecting the opening. "The manipulator wants us to follow. And that means the next step is planned, precise, and designed to observe our reactions." The woman's voice drifted down the stairwell. "Do not falter, Detective. Every hesitation, every misstep, every doubt is recorded. The mind behind the sanctuary learns as it watches." Drake's eyes swept the darkness below. He could sense the faint traces of movement, dust disturbed, faint scratches along the stone walls, and an almost imperceptible draft indicating airflow through hidden vents. Each detail was deliberate, each imperfection intentional. "Prepare yourself," Drake said to Elias. "We move deliberately. Observe, predict, and anticipate. The manipulator believes fear guides action, but precision and patience guide victory." They descended the passage slowly, every step measured. The air grew colder, damp, and heavy with the scent of decay. Drake's revolver cut small arcs of light through the darkness, illuminating hidden doorways and subtle markings carved into the walls. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from deeper in the passage. Drake spun, revolver raised, but the source was elusive. A trap, perhaps, or a warning. The manipulator's voice followed them, teasing, taunting. Every reaction is noted. Every emotion catalogued. How quickly do you adapt under pressure? Elias shivered. "Detective, I don't know if I can." Drake's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "You can. Observation, calm, and attention to detail. That is how we survive. That is how we win." They pressed on, tracing the manipulator's intricate network, following her meticulously constructed tests deeper into the heart of the sanctuary. And with each step, Drake Vane's mind catalogued, analyzed, and anticipated, preparing for the moment when control would shift and the manipulator would finally be exposed. The narrow passage descended sharply, the walls slick with moisture, the air thick with the scent of mildew and iron. Drake Vane's revolver cast a steady circle of light ahead, illuminating a corridor lined with old crates, each shifted slightly as if someone had been studying them. "They've anticipated our path," Drake murmured, noting the subtle scuff marks on the stone. "This is no ordinary passage. It's designed to observe, to test, to intimidate." Elias Rook swallowed hard. I can feel it. Every step, it's like we're being watched. Even in the dark." Drake nodded, voice low and measured. "We are. And the manipulator is clever. Every obstacle, every shifted crate, every sound is deliberate. But observation reveals patterns. Watch closely. A faint metallic click echoed through the corridor, followed by the sudden drop of a crate, narrowly missing Elias's foot. He jumped back, heart hammering. Drake's eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle misalignment of floorboards near the wall. "A trap," he said. "They expect impulsive movement. Fear is their instrument. We move deliberately." He carefully examined the boards, finding a small lever hidden among the grain. Drake pushed it aside, and a second mechanism clicked harmlessly. The crate remained in place. "They've left a window," he murmured. "A deliberate failsafe to see how we react. The manipulator tests control as much as skill. Every minor error is a lesson." Elias exhaled shakily. "So, it's a test, not to kill?" Drake's steel-gray eyes met his. "Not yet. Tests condition behavior. They observe fear, hesitation, precision. But understand this, every test is also a threat. Push too far, or react too quickly, and consequences follow." They moved cautiously forward, following the faint markings Drake had noticed in the ledger earlier. Small scratches along the walls, slight differences in dust accumulation, and carefully shifted furniture formed a subtle path that only someone trained to observe could follow safely. At the end of the corridor, a room opened, dimly lit by a single lantern. Inside, a series of chairs had been arranged in a circle, each with a small, folded note on the seat. The handwriting was meticulous, the ink precise. Drake picked up one. The words were simple but chilling. "Observe, adapt, survive. The next step is yours to choose." He placed the note back carefully. "They're daring us to act. The manipulator wants confrontation, but not recklessness. Every word, every gesture, every movement is calculated. Now we see the pattern clearly, and the next step is our decision." Elias glanced nervously at the circle. "So, what do we do?" Drake's voice was steady, precise. "We follow the pattern, anticipate the trap, control our reactions, and move with purpose. Only then can we force the manipulator's hand." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving a faint mist curling along the sanctuary's exterior. Inside, the manipulator's first trap had been revealed, and Drake Vane, patient and precise, was preparing to turn the test into the moment of control. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving a faint mist curling along the sanctuary's exterior. Inside, the manipulator's first trap had been revealed, and Drake Vane, patient and precise, was preparing to turn the test into the moment of control. "Do you want me to continue part 10, where Drake begins turning the manipulator's games against her?" "Does it?" ChatGPT said. Part 10, Turning the Game. The dim glow from Drake Vane's revolver cut through the oppressive darkness of the sanctuary's inner chambers. Every corner, every shadow, held the potential for a trap. But Drake's mind, trained in observation and strategy, was already several steps ahead. "They expect fear," he whispered to Elias, who followed closely, clutching the ledger. "Every detail, every hesitation, every glance they hope will betray us. But fear will not control us." Elias swallowed hard. "And if they strike?" Drake's eyes scanned the corridor ahead, noting faint scuffs, a slight shift in the dust along the floor, the subtle angle of a beam reflecting the lantern light. "Then we adapt. Observation allows anticipation. The manipulator believes they control the narrative, but they underestimate patience and precision." As they entered a large chamber, the manipulator herself appeared, standing at the far end like a shadowed sentinel. "Ah, Detective Vane," she said softly, almost mockingly. "You followed my paths, decoded my tests. And yet, are you ready for the next lesson?" Drake kept his revolver steady, eyes locked on hers. "Your tests have revealed patterns, not power. Every trap, every mark, every whispered threat has left traces. And now, I follow them instead of reacting blindly." She tilted her head, studying him, her composure unshaken. "Impressive. But observation alone does not grant control. You must act, decide, and take the risk." Drake stepped forward slowly, his movements deliberate, forcing her to adjust her stance. "And that's exactly what I intend to do." Every pattern you left, every mark you made, every false trail. It's part of your game. And now the game changes. The manipulator's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She stepped back slightly, testing his reactions. Drake advanced another pace, tracing a path through the chamber where shadows could conceal threats. His keen eye noticed a slight misalignment in the floor, a mechanism, likely another trap. He paused, motioning to Elias. "Stay back. Observe, do not intervene. Every detail matters." He carefully manipulated the trap, rendering it harmless. "Predictable," he muttered. "Every pattern leaves itself open if you watch closely enough." The manipulator's lips tightened. "You're turning my own methods against me." Drake's gaze was steady, unyielding. "Exactly. And now the choice is yours. Step aside, surrender control, or risk the consequences of underestimating someone who observes as patiently as you do." She studied him for a long moment, calculating, evaluating. Then, almost imperceptibly, she stepped back, acknowledging, if only silently, that control had shifted. Elias exhaled quietly, relief washing over him. "You've done it. You've—" Drake cut him off. "Not yet. Observation has revealed the first cracks. Now we must see the whole picture, understand the motives, and ensure this mind cannot manipulate again." Outside, the last light of dusk faded, leaving the sanctuary wrapped in a heavy, expectant silence. Inside, Drake Vane, patient, precise, and relentless, had begun turning the manipulator's own obsession against her, setting the stage for the confrontation that would finally reveal the truth. The chamber was silent now, save for the soft drip of water from a leaky ceiling. Drake Vane's eyes never wavered from the manipulator, who remained poised yet noticeably tense. The first cracks in her composed facade had begun to show. "You've turned the patterns against me," she admitted, voice low but firm. "But understanding my methods does not mean you understand my motives." Drake stepped closer, revolver lowered but ready, eyes sharp. "Then tell me, why turn the sanctuary into a web of manipulation? Why the traps, the tests, the fear?" She paused, her gaze flicking briefly toward the ledger Elias still clutched. The sanctuary was never just a refuge. It was meant to teach. Those who enter, they reveal themselves, their true character, when confronted with control, danger, observation. I merely accelerated the process. Revealed truths that the world ignores. Drake's jaw tightened. So all this, the fear, the shadows, the manipulations, was to judge them? Or to satisfy yourself? Her eyes darkened, shadowed by a complexity of motives. Both. Control is a method of understanding, yes, but it also protects what matters. Those who cannot adapt, who falter under observation, are a danger, not just to themselves, but to others in the sanctuary. A guide I watch, I correct, and those who pass the test survive, stronger than before. Elias glanced between them, bewildered. "So, it wasn't about harming anyone?" Drake shook his head slightly. "No, but manipulation, fear, and control are dangerous tools. Even when intended for protection, they can cross the line. The ledger, the marks, the traps, they were all lessons disguised as threats. But someone still had to step in to prevent them from escalating further." The manipulator's lips curled faintly. "And you? You stepped in, observed, anticipated, and turned the lesson back on me. Perhaps you understand more than I anticipated, Detective Vane. Perhaps too much." Drake's gaze remained unwavering. "Understanding is only useful when paired with restraint. Your methods endangered more than just patterns. They endangered people. That stops now." A subtle shift occurred in her stance, a moment of vulnerability, though her poise remained largely intact. "Then perhaps the lesson is mutual. You see clearly, Detective. But will you act on it, or merely observe as I did?" Drake's steel-gray eyes met hers, steady and unyielding. "Yet, observation alone is insufficient when control threatens lives. The manipulator's reign over fear ends tonight." Outside, the last shadows of night crept across the sanctuary's exterior. Inside, the manipulator's motives had been laid bare, and Drake Vane, ever patient and precise, prepared for the final confrontation, where observation, anticipation, and resolve would meet the mind that had turned sanctuary into a testing ground. The sanctuary's upper chambers were shrouded in shadows, the faint glow of lanterns reflecting off damp walls. Drake Vane advanced deliberately, every step measured, revolver in hand, notebook secured in his coat. Elias Rook trailed behind, tense but resolute, the ledger now their roadmap to the manipulator's final gambit. "You've observed, adapted, survived," the manipulator said from the far end of the chamber, voice calm yet sharp. "But observation alone will not determine the outcome. Action, decisive action, will." Drake's gaze was steel gray, unflinching. "You've manipulated, tested, and threatened enough. The people here have endured your lessons. Now it ends. No more tests. No more fear." She tilted her head, studying him, her calm demeanor masking the subtle calculation in her mind. "Do you truly believe control can end with words, detective? Control is an instinct, a method, a compulsion. You may stop the patterns, but you cannot stop the desire to manipulate." Drake stepped closer, revolver raised. "Perhaps, but I can stop the consequences. And that is enough." With a sudden movement, she lunged toward a hidden panel on the wall, attempting to trigger a trap. Drake reacted instantly, pressing forward, using his army-honed reflexes to intercept her action. His revolver's muzzle flash lit the chamber briefly as he fired a warning shot, shattering the lantern and sending sparks dancing across the walls. Elias froze, heart pounding, as the manipulator paused, evaluating her options. She raised her hands slightly, signaling truce, yet her eyes remained calculating. "Very well, detective," she said, voice low, almost admiring. "You anticipate every move. You read the patterns as I did. But the mind behind the manipulator must adapt." Drake's eyes narrowed. "Adaptation is irrelevant when the consequences fall on others. Your games end tonight. No more fear, no more lessons at someone else's expense." For a tense moment, silence hung thick in the room. Then, with deliberate calm, she stepped back from the panel, acknowledging defeat without conceding pride. Elias exhaled shakily. "It's over." Drake lowered his revolver slightly but remained vigilant. Observation has revealed the patterns. Anticipation has neutralized the traps. And action has prevented harm. The manipulator's influence ends here, but the lessons we've learned about vigilance, patience, and precision remain. The woman studied him one last time, a faint, respectful smile on her lips. "Perhaps you are the better observer. For now, Detective Vane." Drake allowed a small nod, eyes sweeping the room, cataloging every detail one final time. "For now," he echoed, voice steady. "The sanctuary is safe, the manipulations ended, and the path forward clear." Outside, dawn began to break, light spilling into the fog of Ashford streets. Inside, the sanctuary exhaled, its shadows retreating, its secrets revealed, and Drake Vane, patient, precise, and relentless, had brought resolution to a labyrinth of fear, observation, and control. Elias let out a trembling laugh, the tension finally breaking. "Detective, you did it. We made it through." Drake's gaze softened just slightly. "We made it through because we observed, anticipated, and acted, not recklessly but deliberately. That is how the manipulator is defeated. And that is how the sanctuary survives." The case was closed. The lessons were learned. And for Drake Vane, another night of precision, patience, and relentless pursuit of truth had reached its conclusion. You've just heard Ashford Beneath the Shadow, written and narrated for Audible Archives. Sometimes the silence you choose becomes the sharpest truth of all. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps these cases alive.